This is part 2 of number systems, decimal places, significant figures and scientific notation. So in the previous video we looked at decimal places. We're now going to take a look at significant figures. So our significant figure questions are these 5 questions here. We're going to focus on the first 3 to start with because they don't start with zeros, and in the last 2 there's an extra little thing that we have to remember with the zeros. So for our first 3 questions then, significant figures basically means the same idea as rounding, like we learned in the previous video. But with rounding, you can only take the numbers after the decimal point, whereas with significant figures, you can take the numbers before the decimal point as well and count them in. So we always start on the first number, and then we use that many numbers, or the amount of numbers that they ask us for the significant figures. So let's take a look and see what I mean by that. If I'm talking about 3 significant figures, that's 3.14159, corrected 3 significant figures, I take the first 3 numbers. Doesn't matter where the decimal is. So like I did in my rounding, I'm going to underline my first 3 numbers. So 3.14 is my number. And then I check to see the number directly after that is a 1. So is it going to affect that 4? It's not. It needs to be 5 or higher to affect it. So all I'm going to do there is I'm going to write out 3.14, and that's my answer. I can change all of these to be 0 because that's technically what we're doing. We're taking the first 3 numbers and everything else goes to be 0. But once the numbers are at the end and they are after the decimal point, then they don't change the value. So 3.14 is the same worth as 3.14000. So we can get rid of them or you can keep them. It is totally up to you. But you don't have to have them there. If we take a look at this second question then, same number, 3.14159, and we're now going to do 5 significant figures, which means I'm going to take the first 5 numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my first 5 numbers. I check the number directly after the 5 that I'm taking. It's a 9, which means that it is going to affect my last digit. So what I'm going to have to do there is that 9 has made that 5, it's going to make that 5 go up by 1, like the same as in rounding. And I'm going to have 3.14 and I'm going to have a 6 then at the end. My third question then, again we're talking about significant figures. It's 72,536.92, correcting 3 significant figures. And again, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my first 3 numbers and then I'm going to check and make sure the number after the 5, does it affect that 5? The next number is a 3. That doesn't affect the 5, so I leave my number as 7, 2, 5. Now, in the question 1, I mentioned about putting in the zeros, and I said that they weren't of any value there. They didn't change the value, so I didn't need them. And it was the same idea for question 2. But for question 3, if I don't change that 3 to be a 0 and that 6 to be a 0, then that changes the value quite substantially. It changes it from 72,500, which it is with the zeros, to 725, which is a massive difference. So if the zeros that I need to put in are before the decimal, then I need to put those in because otherwise our value is totally different. I can then write in 0, 0 instead of the 9 and the 2, but I don't have to because those numbers appear after the decimal, so they don't change the actual worth of it. Okay, our fourth and fifth question then. These are pretty much the same. The only thing extra with these is that a significant figure is a figure where it is not a 0. So the first number cannot be a 0. Any other number can be a 0, but my first significant figure cannot be a 0. So for instance, if I look at this question part 4 here, it says 1 significant figure. I'm not taking that 0 there. My first significant figure cannot be a 0. So my significant figure here, they're going to start from that number 2. Now I'm going to again keep the zeros in it because they are worth something. They change the value if I don't keep them in it. But the 2 is the number I'm really interested in here. What I do is the same as I've done before. I check the digit directly after it and see is it going to affect that 2. And it's not because it's the number 3. It has to be the number 5 or higher for it to affect that 2 and make it go up by 1. So my answer for this one, I keep my 0, and then my 2 goes next. All the rest of them can be written in as zeros, so the 3, the 4 and the 5, but they don't have to be because again they don't change the value. The ones that change the value are going to be this side, okay? Right, and our last question then, here we're looking to correct 3 significant figures. So again, the first one can't be a 0. Every other one can be a 0, but the first one can't. So I'm not using any of these first 4 zeros, but I'm starting at that 5. I want 3 significant figures, so there's 1, 2, and 3. I checked the number directly after my last significant figure, and it's a 6, which means that it is going to affect that 0, and it's going to make it go up by 1. So my number then is going to be 0.000, 5, 0, and 1. So remember, the first significant figure can't be 0. The second one can. This one here is okay to be 0. It's the first one cannot be a 0. And remember, I can write in 0, 0 after it. I don't have to because they're not changing the values. But if I didn't write in these zeros here, I would be changing what that is worth. So that's our significant